Great to get started here today. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of our guests, to our Democrats Abroad members, all of you who've joined this call from around the world. I'm Martha McDevitt Pugh. I'm the International Chair of Democrats Abroad, and I'm a California voter living in the Netherlands. And I'm so grateful that all of you took the time to join us today. As we head into the November elections, democracy is on the ballot, and we are in a fight for all of the values that we hold dear. We have critical elections in Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and California, which we'll talk about today. And that's why I'm so delighted to introduce to you our special guest in just a moment, someone who is fighting for our country in this time of continual efforts to undermine our power and freedoms as US citizens, attacks on our constitutional rights, as well as the Constitution itself. At Democrats Abroad, we have shown time and again that our organizing on the ground to register voters, to build community across more than 60 countries, can bring in the votes that can help win close elections. And we make a real difference by including Americans who would otherwise be left out of the voting process because they don't know how to vote, they don't know that they can vote, or they're not confident. They're not sure that it's okay to vote from abroad. And we're here for those voters to build that confidence. And we're in a really exciting moment right now with races on the ballot this November that our votes from abroad will help win if we all vote. And we can keep the legislatures in Virginia and New Jersey in Democratic hands, as well as elect two incredible women, Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill, to be the next governors of Virginia and New Jersey. And we also have elections locally all across the country and very important retention elections of the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. On top of that, we have the California Proposition 50 Redistricting Retaliation Act, which is a response to the redistricting that happened this last summer in Texas, with the aim to gain those 5 Republican congressional seats in a state that was already very gerrymandered. And with nearly 1 million Californians living abroad, we can make a real difference. Now, many voters abroad have already received their ballots. If you haven't, we are here to help you. So just some reminders before I introduce our esteemed guest. Request your ballot today if you haven't already done so, and you can do that at votefromabroad.org. And return your ballot. If you need help, reach out to our help desks, or if you need to know how to return your ballot, get in touch with your country committee or visit our website. We're here to help you get it all the way through the process and get it counted. And so with that, I'm delighted to introduce our speaker. Beto O'Rourke is a 4th-generation Texan born and raised in El Paso, where he has served as a small business owner, a city council representative, and a member of Congress. He founded and currently leads Powered by People, a Texas-based organization that works to expand democracy and produce democratic victories through voter registration and direct voter engagement. Powered by People has helped register over 250,000 unregistered Texans to vote since its inception in December 2019. Beto is married to Amy O'Rourke, and together they are raising Ulysses, Molly, and Henry in El Paso's historic Sunset Heights. I was really thrilled when Beto O'Rourke reached out to me last week to offer to speak to Democrats Abroad. He was such an inspiring guest last September on our Marathon Americans Abroad for Harris event, and I'm grateful for all of his work with Democratic state parties like ours across the country, speaking at town halls, and for all of his work registering voters. So with that, I'd like to hand over to our guest, Beto O'Rourke.
Thank you, Martha. I want to begin by just sharing with you all, because you may take this for granted, just what a powerful force Democrats Abroad is. I know this from having been a candidate on the ballot, from supporting other candidates on the ballot in critical elections, and being invited by Democrats Abroad to reach out to my fellow Texans who might be living just about anywhere around the world, to encourage them to ensure that they're registered, that they request a ballot, that they get it sent in. As my fellow Texans know, it is a bit of a challenge given the restrictions on voting in Texas. And Democrats Abroad has just done a brilliant job of helping American citizens navigate this process and ensure that their voices are heard and their votes are counted. And then on a personal note, I reached out to Martha on a separate but related issue. I wanted to hold a live in-person town hall in Berlin, where I will be in a couple of weeks. And Martha responded the same day, El Paso time here in Texas, though it was 2 or 3 a.m. In the morning in the Netherlands. And we were on a Zoom call the next day. And so just her responsiveness and the way that she's urgently meeting this moment where so much is on the line, I think speaks so highly of her and this organization. And then Angela is just an extraordinarily organized professional who has brought us all together on this Zoom and has, brought this thing off without a flaw. So I just want to thank Democrats abroad, Martha and Angela, and everyone out there. When I saw you all signing in and saying hello and shouting out from where you are currently living around the world, it just filled me with pride. And I can't totally tell you why, but it kind of made me emotional just to think about folks in South Africa and Germany and Italy, where I saw Syria say hello, and just all over the place. Just that you all, despite the distance, care enough about what's going on in this country, not only to be registered and to request your ballot and to turn it in on time, but to participate in this conversation now in 2025 and not wait until the midterms of 2026 or the presidential election of 2028, if there is a presidential election in 2028, because like Martha, I think you understand the urgency of this moment. And I also hope that you see cause for optimism in the fact that all of us have voluntarily come together today, right? We could sit this one out. We could give in to the temptation to despair. We could assume, as Trump and the MAGA movement wants us to, that their rise to power, that their consolidation of authoritarian control, that it's inevitable. Like there's just nothing we can do. We're powerless against it. That's how they want to make us feel. And yet, nonetheless, here we are. And so, that makes me proud. It is further fuel for my optimism and greater incentive for me to continue the work that I'm doing here in Texas and across the country with Powered by People and with just folks who believe in America and this democracy and this like extraordinary idea that is so rare over the course of human history and really kind of exceptional on the planet today, that we're organized together as a country, not around a common ethnicity or race or religion or even ideology, but just this foundational principle that we're all created equal and that we should expect to be treated equally under the law. It's just amazing. Just saying that out loud right now, it is that fills me with pride, right? Whatever our challenges, I would argue still the best thing going on planet Earth today. But as Martha and I were just talking about before we started this Zoom, that's not inevitable either. That this will continue. 249 years in, there's nothing that guarantees us another 249 or another 2 years for that matter. I mean, this is something that the generations before ours have literally fought to establish, winning our independence from the most powerful empire on the planet, defeating the Confederacy to ensure that never again could one American own the life of another. The fight against fascism in World War II to defend democracy here at home and for our allies abroad. And then those who willingly sacrificed their lives in the fight for civil and voting rights in the 1950s and the 1960s. That is what has brought us through to today. And so when you see the challenges that we face, I want you to take some heart in remembering just who we are and what we're made of and where we've come from. And like those generations that I just described, it now falls to us. Those 249 years of service and struggle and sacrifice, that is our great inheritance. And what we do as the heirs of this American tradition, I think is going to define us in the eyes of history and is really going to determine what is possible in this country. We have the power to decide the outcome. This chapter is yet to be written, right? And we have the pen in our hands right now. And so, as I described from my perspective here in Texas, what I think is happening in this country, and as we discuss this, as Angela brings more people into the conversation, I want you to hold on to that hope that is not vain, that is, not performative, that is grounded in action and in real potential and possibility and power that each and every single one of us holds as a U.S. citizen. Because it is a really challenging moment in American history, to put it bluntly. You have a president who, más o menos 8 months plus into this administration, has routinely defied the co-equal branch of government in the federal courts. He's dismantled the agencies and departments established by another co-equal branch of government, whether it's USAID, whether it's the Department of Education. He has colluded with corrupt public officials. Look at Eric Adams in New York City. He's also tried to cover up the crimes of the elite and powerful, Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, others who have been able to buy influence and access and outcomes with him personally or with the administration. And on a daily basis, he defies the Constitution and the rule of law in this country. And for those of you who have been following the news in Texas and now more broadly across the country, you are witnessing him trying to grab more power. In Texas, he asked Governor Greg Abbott to give him 5 congressional seats. Martha alluded to this in her opening remarks. He told America that he's entitled to 5 more seats in Texas. He said, I won big there in 2024. I deserve 5 more seats. And Greg Abbott, our Republican governor here in Texas, and the Republican majority legislature, thick as thieves with the president, dutifully redrew these districts, but not before Texas Democrats in the legislature broke quorum, left the state, tried to deny the Republican counterparts the numbers necessary to certify these maps. And they did it at great personal expense and risk. They were threatened with arrests. They were threatened with having their positions vacated in the state legislature. They were threatened with $500 per day fines that they couldn't pay out of campaign accounts. And they nonetheless broke quorum for the entirety of the first special session that was called by the governor to redraw these 5 congressional districts. And though they ultimately came back, and though Greg Abbott was ultimately able to sign these new 5 gerrymandered districts into law, which is currently being contested in the federal courts. I don't know how that's going to play out, but I'm frankly not holding my breath right now. But despite that outcome, it kickstarted an incredibly important national conversation that I think helped inspire Governor Gavin Newsom in California to meet fire with fire. As Martha mentioned, there is something called Proposition 50 that's on the ballot. And look, let's put a stop right here to the conversation. If you are a registered voter in California, this is arguably the most important election in the history of the state of California. If we vote yes on Prop 50, if we win that election, those 5 seats that were stolen in the state of Texas will be met by 5 newly drawn Democratic majority seats in the state of California that gets us back to status quo ante bellum and gives us a fighting chance to win the election in 2026. Because here's the deal. Donald Trump would not be trying to steal these seats in Texas or Indiana or Florida or the other states where he's going to try to redraw and gerrymander if he was not afraid of the fact that he's going to lose his majority in the House of Representatives. He personally is as unpopular as any American president in the history of this country, with the exception of Donald Trump in his first term in office. His signature policies, like transferring trillions of dollars of American wealth to the already wealthiest people on the face of the planet, the 1% in America, or adding $4 trillion of debt, or cutting millions of people off of Medicaid and healthcare, or these warrantless roundups of our fellow U.S. citizens and immigrants alike by masked, plainclothes federal agents without badges or warrants. This stuff is not selling in America. It is not popular. People don't like it. His ratings on his presidency, his administration, and his policies are absolutely in the tank. That's another cause for optimism. He wouldn't be doing this stuff if he wasn't afraid, if he wasn't panicked, if he didn't realize that on this current trajectory, he's going to lose power. That's why he's doing it. And again, that's why this election in California, which is taking place this November in 2025, is so critically important. Get those ballots in if you are California citizens. So that's why he's doing this, right? That's why they fought so hard in Texas. That's why they tried to arrest these state legislators. And that's why our organization, Powered by People, which supported this fight, has been targeted and persecuted by the Attorney General of the state of Texas, who froze our assets, stopped our ability temporarily to fundraise, threatened publicly to put me behind bars, and has filed criminal charges against me, which is all ludicrous, makes a mockery of the rule of law in the state of Texas. But that's just where we are right now. This is the price for participating in the defense of the right to vote, the rule of law, and the US Constitution. And we cannot be found wanting. Because look, if we win Prop 50 in California, if we win a majority in the House of Representatives in 2026, and to get there, we got to do the work in 2025, right? If we do all of that, there will then be a check on Donald Trump's lawlessness. There will be accountability for his corruption and his crimes. And there will be the very real possibility of free and fair elections in 2028. Conversely, if we fail on Prop 50 in California, if we fail to win a majority in the House of Representatives in 2026, then you will have a consolidation of authoritarian power in his hands that I believe will be unstoppable. And I'm not an alarmist. I'm the most optimistic guy you will meet. And I'm not a Chicken Little who believes that the sky is falling, but I also firmly believe in the truth. And the truth is, if we don't win a majority, this American experiment is over. There is no way to get it back. The warrantless roundups will continue apace at a level as bad as it is today that we cannot even believe. $45 billion has been appropriated through the Trump administration for new ICE detention facilities in America. Now, think about the fact that you have record low levels of inbound migration to this country, record high levels of roundups and deportations. What are the $45 billion in new detention capacity being built for? Who is it for? So you understand what our future, what our fate is if we fail to win right now, right? I don't think there are 2028 elections. I think a Republican majority House rolls out the royal red carpet for a Trump third term, something he has promised us and warned us he will pursue. And we know he will if we're honest with ourselves. So that leaves it to all of us who care about this democracy and this great country and these 249 years of sacrifice, struggle, and service that has come through to us to do all that we can with what we have wherever we are around the world, here in El Paso, Texas, or wherever you are internationally. And at a minimum, and this is just the bare minimum, right? This is just the ante to get into this thing. We got to vote in these elections in 2025 that Martha highlighted at the beginning, whether it's in New Jersey, whether it's in Pennsylvania, whether it's in Virginia, or whether it's in California or anywhere else where we have important ballot issues in 2025. But we also have to be organizing right now for these midterms in 2026. And that means making sure that we're telling our friends and family members, our colleagues, for those who are going to school internationally, our classmates, about just how important it is to get registered to vote in preparation for 2026, to be sharing the crisis that our country is in, and also our power to meet this crisis with our ability to vote, our ability to speak out under the First Amendment, and our ability to persuade and convince and bring together other people as we organize in congressional districts across the United States of America. It also means donating to Democrats abroad to make sure that they have the resources to get the vote out wherever that vote exists around the world. And importantly, it means not losing faith, right? Not giving in to what they want us to believe is inevitable, not giving in to the intimidation, not giving in to the temptation to despair. And from my experience, the best antidote to despair is action, is getting ourselves in this fight. And if you want to volunteer with Democrats Abroad, I hope that you'll do it if you're not already. If you want to volunteer with Powered by People, if you want to volunteer on Prop 50, please get after it. There's nothing that makes me feel better in the face of all this chaos and cruelty that I'm just describing than to remind myself that I have agency in this moment. The alternative, scrolling through Twitter, reading the headlines, it's incredibly depressing. And it's very hard to get moving when I'm not already in the game. So the fact that you're here today is incredibly encouraging. The fact that we're going to have this conversation is extraordinarily hopeful. And the fact that we're going to commit ourselves and one another to doing whatever it takes to save the country is exactly what we need at this moment of truth. So thanks for being on the phone call. I'm looking forward to answering your questions, hearing what you're working on. And then for those who are going to be in Berlin in this prospective town hall that we're going to hold in person on October 7th, looking forward to meeting you in person there. So, Angela, thank you for coordinating this and for helping us bring more people into the conversation.
Okay, well, let's take some questions. So today we're going to do something a little bit different, everybody. We're going to pull you out of the audience and let you speak directly to Beto. If you just want to put your subject, don't raise your hands, put your subject in the Q&A and I'll pull you out from there. Yeah, so just go ahead and just say what you want to talk about, just briefly. I mean, just put like whatever it is, or just put yourself in the Q&A. All you have to do is just write in there, I want to speak, and we'll pull you out and let you talk. Okay, our first person is Naomi. Let me just grab her out. All right, Naomi, I'm going to let you speak. Go for it.
Thank you, Angela, for all of this. And thank you, Beto, for this inspiring discussion. So I am a voter from abroad. I live in Switzerland. And I'm specifically a progressive supporter. And I used to donate regularly to progressive campaigns. But because of pressure from the GOP, Act Blue has closed off all possibilities of donating not just to campaigns, but to anything related to a campaign. Has there been, including your activities, has there been any initiative to open this up from a different perspective where maybe we have to provide a copy of our passport? I'm already donating in dollars with an American credit card, drawn in an American bank. I have a New York voting address. None of this matters. So is there any mechanism? And this becomes more and more important because progressives struggle for funding. And so what can we do to help progressive campaigns? Thanks.
Thank you, Naomi. It's interesting that you mentioned Act Blue. When I told you earlier that the Attorney General of the state of Texas came after us for supporting this fight against the gerrymander within our state, not only did he freeze our assets and attempt to pull our license to do business, and we're the largest voter registration organization in the state of Texas, but they also sought to intimidate Act Blue, and Act Blue actually stopped taking donations, not just from international donors, but from donors in the state of Texas, and froze the donations that had come in. And so we've actually been working with Act Blue, which has now unfrozen our assets. We got a great stay or pause on the restraining order from the Attorney General. So we're back in business with Act Blue. But from that experience, we got to know the Act Blue CEO pretty well. Naomi, I did not know this was an issue with international donors. So Athena Mason, who works with me in Powered by People, is on this call. And Athena, I'm going to ask you to make a note of this. And if we can, through Martha, we'll get Naomi's contact information. I'll reach out to Act Blue. I'll make them aware of this challenge, and I'll see if there's a way to work through this. Naomi, the other thought I have real quickly is when we were unable to process donations through Act Blue domestically, we found another platform that would do it. It's not as widely used. The challenge there is that they don't have everyone's credit card information saved, so it's a little bit of a wind up to get people to start donating on it. But there are alternatives if for some reason we can't get this done with Act Blue. But I will follow up with you, and then I will share with Martha the findings of or the results of our conversation with Act Blue, and hopefully we can get that restarted again. Because you're right, if Elon Musk spent $300 million in the 2024 election to back his preferred candidate for the presidency, imagine what he will, or any other billionaire for that matter, will be able to spend in 2026. And so our small dollar donations, I think, added up, can meet that challenge, but not if we're tying one hand behind our back. So, Naomi, thank you for letting me know.
Thank you, Beto.
All right. Our next question is from somebody who I really wish they had a full name. In fact, if you have a full name, could you please rename yourself and not just use your initials? So this person is called OK. So here we go. OK, who are you? Please talk. Are you there? Maybe they can't. We'll come back to you. Next person is someone named Ace. Ace, are you there?
Hello, actually, my name is Harold. I apologize.
Okay.
Just sort of using
Hi,
the
Harold.
work Zoom, and I'm calling in from Bangkok, Thailand. So I'm 13 hours into your future, and I can tell you your future is night. My question has to do with the SCOTUS and voting rights. I just saw before joining this a brief copy of what the DOJ has submitted in the Louisiana case. And basically the DOJ, which used to defend the Voting Rights Act, is now asking the SCOTUS to basically gut Article 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which means states are going to be free to do whatever. And as a minority voter, this is of concern. I vote in California, where that's not much of an issue, but other states, of course, states in the South, this is a big issue. So what do you think we can do to counter this assault on the Voting Rights Act?
Harold, thanks for the question. You're absolutely right. And in much the same way that you can tell me my future today, Texas can tell you your future in other states, because this is one that has suffered more than any other since the voting rights was dismembered in 2013. That was the Shelby versus Holder decision that removed preclearance, which gave Texas free rein to close down more than 700 polling locations in the state, though we're the fastest growing state in the union, to limit ballot drop-off locations in the middle of COVID to one per county, including in Harris County that has 5 million people, one ballot drop-off location, to change the rules on vote by mail, which is of particular interest to everyone who is voting from abroad. The failure rate in the mail-in ballots in the 2022 primary was 13%. 13 out of every 100 ballots cast were rejected. That is Banana Republic kind of performance. It is not what we expect from a U.S. democracy. And now the last vestige of the Voting Rights Act, the Article 2, is about to be removed as well. In addition, y además, you have this. Donald Trump is already seeding the ground for conspiracy theories that he will have his Department of Justice act on should they lose a majority in the House in 2026. What do I mean by that? He's casting aspersions on vote by mail, including your votes, folks. He is casting aspersions on voting machines, and he is trying to take, even though it's explicitly ruled out in the Constitution that he cannot do this, he is trying to take federal control of elections, which constitutionally are administered by the states. And as you all probably know, his administration is already asking for voter data from a number of states. Soon it will be all 50 states, including your personal information, like your social security number. So you ask, what do we do against all this? I sure wish, just as an aside, that when we had power as Democrats, we had the White House, the House, and the Senate in 2021, that we had used that power to pass voting rights, like the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. That would have kept us from having this conversation right now, but we didn't. But that's a lesson for the future if and when we get power again. But for the time being, we're going to have to go back to what pro-democracy and many Democrats were doing in the 1950s and the 1960s before the Voting Rights Act of 1965, signed into law by President Johnson. That means we're going to have to organize like Septima Clark in the Deep South, holding these citizenship schools, helping people navigate these Byzantine processes like we have in Texas to be able to cast your ballot. So Powered by People, for example, when we register young people to vote on these college campuses, we also ask them for their cell phone number. We get their permission to stay in touch with them. And then on an individual basis, like let's say I registered Angela at the University of Texas at Austin, I will text Angela personally, say, hey, Angela, this is Beto. I registered you last month. Want to make sure you got your voter registration card in the mail. Angela says, you know what? I'm living in Germany right now. How do I vote from here? I text her back. Let me connect you with Democrats abroad. Let me also, share the link to the website. So this real active engagement and involvement with our fellow voters, and not assuming that, because you're registered, you know how to vote, or because, you voted in the 2024 election, you're going to vote in the 2026. We really got to stay engaged with one another. We really got to help each other right now, because the other side understands the stakes and consequences of this election, and they're playing for all the marbles. We've got to do everything we can, despite, Harold, what you just mentioned as this incredibly challenging dynamic, to assist one another to vote, because the Supreme Court is not going to ride to our rescue. There will be no enforcement for the DOJ on voting rights, as you mentioned. And we're up against really anti-democratic state legislatures in states like Texas and throughout the Deep South. So we've got to be there for one another. Powered by People, our organization, and there are many others like us, is one of the places that you can volunteer and help, even from abroad.
Okay. Our next question is from Pat Gross. Here we go. Pat, do you want to ask your
Unmute.
question?
Yes. Hi, Pat Gross. I'm from New York and I live in London. Just the level of madness and corruption that you've referenced, and just all of the disregard for the Constitution. Do we need to worry about voting from abroad, which is something that he definitely would like to stop? And, how is the Constitution being so disregarded? And is it really, do you have any clue what's going on with the Republicans? Have they all lost their brains? How is it possible that none of them are having any problem with what's going on?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most disappointing aspects of what is happening right now. Every now and then, look, and I don't want to say, all hope is lost on the other side. Of all people, Ted Cruz admonished the administration and Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, for unconstitutionally, illegally, there's just no doubt about this, suspending First Amendment protections for Jimmy Kimmel because he said something that the administration disagreed with. Ted Cruz, of all people, spoke up. Now, is that cynical and he's trying to create some distance between himself and J.D. Vance? Should there be a contest for the Republican primary in 2020? I don't know, but I'm looking for hope where I can find it. But it's really, Pat, to your question, it's the exception that proves the rule. The vast majority of the Republican conference is towing the line and completely abnegating their constitutional responsibilities. We can point to one example after another. The president illegally impounding congressionally authorized and appropriated funds. As we all know from our sixth grade, lessons on the Constitution, the Congress has the power of the purse. It is not the president. The Congress has the power on tariffs, not the president. And to all of these abuses of power, the Republican majority Congress has been completely complicit. It's part of the reason that the president is so panicked about the 2026 election, why he's taking such extraordinary measures, the mid-decade gerrymandering across the country, the requesting of voter data, the intimidation tactics, because he knows that if he loses that compliant Congress, if there's a real check on his power, there will also come with that real accountability for what he's done. I mean, one of the most chilling things is the impunity with which he operates right now, as though he understands that he will never face a trial or the truth or any consequences for his actions. And it is that air of inevitability that I think has real power behind it, right? I mean, we know friends and family, fellow Americans who are like, you know what, this is over. They've got all the power. They've got the billionaires, they've got the Supreme Court, they have both houses of Congress, they have the White House, they have the legislatures, the governor's mansions. Who are we against all of that? And it's why I started this conversation with a reminder that we've been up against some pretty tall challenges before, even greater than these. The armies of the Confederacy, the divisions of the Third Reich. I mean, we overcame all that stuff at great consequence and cost, including to our fellow Americans' lives. But we overcame that, and we're in one of those moments. I just listened to a report on the unconstitutional and absolute illegal murder of people who the administration says are ferrying fentanyl into the US. You and I have no facts about this, but we are drone striking boats full of people. In one, there were 11 people on a boat that had turned around back towards Venezuela. They were all killed. Another boat, and then another boat. The president believes that he can declare these people terrorists, and that gives him the power. Nothing in the Constitution that says that is possible. So, Pat, here's the way I look at it. Donald Trump and the Republicans care more about power than anything, than the Constitution, the rule of law, what is right, what is moral, what is ethical. Democrats, heretofore, up until this point, have cared more about being right, being ethical, coloring within the lines, than they have cared about being in power. We are now in a bare-knuckled brawl for power. And if we lose this coming into 2026, it's all over. There's no Constitution to speak of. It's one of the reasons, look, and I bet you I speak for the vast majority on this call. We all hate gerrymandering. We absolutely abhor the idea that in the middle of a decade, just for partisan advantage, you would redraw the districts in your state. And that's why it's a lot to swallow to get behind Gavin Newsom and his redrawing mid-decade of what's going on in California. But if we kept playing by the old rules and allowed them to run the tables on us as they will, then there will be nothing left for us to fight for. So Pat, it could not be more dire. It could not be more dark. And the window is closing as we speak, but we still have time, right? We still have this power. And yes, he will come after your vote and your ability to cast it. So please cross every T, dot every I, follow everything that Martha asked us to do. And again, that's the ante, that's the bare minimum. We also have to go out there and have those uncomfortable conversations. We're not supposed to talk religion or politics at the dinner table. Nonetheless, you must talk about politics right now and bring more people into this election, or we will lose what Lincoln called the last best hope of Earth. And we're at that moment right now.
Whew.
Okay. All right, let's see who's next. Let me see if I can. The next person is Betty Wilkerson. Betty, are you able to unmute and ask your question? Betty?
Hi, I'm here. Yeah, can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So here's the thing, Beto. My family's been active in Democratic politics for a very long time. My daughter got married and they moved from Chicago to Los Angeles. She's Black. He's not. And what they've found is, incredible threats of being even on the street. And so, they're scared about talking about politics. They're scared about being out on the street at night. And they could get arrested and thrown into a jail, even though both of them are American citizens, and her husband is a birthright citizen, as am I, her mom. So what can we do to keep our families protected? How can we encourage them to engage on these issues when it might end up in jail and I won't even know where they are? Because I'm in Zambia and, their dad's gone. So what's your recommendation? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Betty, for joining us and asking this really great question. I think we've got to level with one another and be honest about the fact that there is no free ride in this democracy. Meaning that I keep talking about, registering and voting being the bare minimum, and I keep referring to these previous heroic generations, the Revolutionary Civil War, World War II, civil rights, voting rights. I mean, those folks did this at great cost. 300,000 lives lost to bring the Confederacy to its knees. How many Americans, sacrificed themselves to defeat fascism in World War II? How many names will we never know who were lost in the struggle for civil and voting rights? And we're almost not a victim, but their success, those hard-won victories, can sometimes lure us into some complacency. That great line that so many misinterpret from Dr. King, that the arc of the moral universe, bends towards justice. I, for one, for a long time, labored under the illusion that it just bends towards justice. I mean, it's great. I love it. It's just a law of physics. But no, people had to bend it, and we have to bend it. And as those previous generations were called to service, we are being called right now. And you might be imprisoned, okay? I mentioned $45 billion in new detention capacity in a country that already has a record level of detention capacity and a record low level of inbound migration and undocumented immigrants that could be detained, because they're all being deported right now. Those detention cells could be for me. That Beto O'Rourke is aiding and abetting these illegal immigrants, these terrorist thugs. For national security purposes, we got to shut him up, put him away, or send him to the gulag in El Salvador, and then he's El Salvador's problem, and he's beyond our jurisdiction in the United States of America. Sound crazy? They have already done it to our fellow U.S. citizens. So it's probably not what we all want to hear right now, but I think we got to be honest with one another that this does not come free of consequence or risk to be involved in this. And the god-awful murder of Charlie Kirk a couple of weeks back, it makes us all think about just how alarming the rise of political violence is in America. The Speaker of the Minnesota House murdered with her husband, the attack on Paul Pelosi, the firebombs thrown into Governor Shapiro's house, the attempt to kidnap and potentially murder Governor Whitmer. We're in a really dangerous place in America. But look, here's the thing. Part of the intent on those who seek to terrorize us is to cow us into silence, and silence will be complicity. And so it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be without risk, but we got to get out there. But here's the hope that I can hold out to you, Betsy, and to your kids and to anybody else who's wanting to be involved. There's real strength in numbers. For those who participated in these abroad or saw them here domestically, the No Kings rallies, the hands-off protests, the folks who are gathering on high-traffic street corners on a daily basis to say, hey, Trump is trying to fire 83,000 employees at the VA, most of whom are veterans. What do you think about that? Our ability to band together and to cut through the misinformation on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and from the White House and the press secretary and connect with one another, that is driving down the president's poll numbers. It's giving us hope, and there's real solidarity. And look, when they lock one of us up, we all got to stand up to be counted. We got to testify. We got to make sure that our fellow Americans see what's going on. They still respond to political pressure, the administration. And when it gets to an unbearable point, they have to act and they have to relent. And we've seen it before, okay? So look, this is going to come at some cost and at some risk, but there's real power in numbers. We got to stick together. What's that great Ben Franklin quote? We either hang together or we'll swing alone. I mean, we've got to stick together right now, which is why coming on this call, seeing all of you here gives me some real hope. But yeah, these are tough times. But look, as tough as they are, they pale in comparison to what will happen should we not win a majority in the House in 2026. This is for all the marbles. I hate to be so dire, folks, and I wish I could do a better job at cheering you up, but I think part of my job is to be honest, to be truthful, and to rally us around the urgent action necessary to save this country before we lose it.
Yes, for sure. And I just want to drop it in the chat one more time about the elections. Uh, we have elections in every state, but the big ones are California, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Texas, Tennessee, and Virginia. There are a lot of mayoral races all around the country, and it's really important to request your ballot and make sure your voice is counted. Ask for your ballot to come by email. Our next question is from Ronnie Rubin in France. Go ahead, Ronnie.
Yes, sorry, I signed in on my DA France. I'm the chair of DA France, East France. Hi, Martha. Hi, everybody. And hi, Beto. I sure wish I could vote in Texas, but I vote in California. Here's the thing I'm curious about. You know, we represent millions of Americans abroad, and your opening statements really touched me. I said you were touched by us being here, and I was touched by what you said. What I often find on social media when I make a commentary about U.S. politics, oh, I get this pushback. Oh, you left the country. Your vote, you don't even count. What are you talking about? And you know, I think it's crazy. We're all here for different reasons. Millions of us. Some love, some work, some choice of lifestyle. But there's a lot of soft power where we are, what we do, how we represent our country. But yet I feel that in the US, sometimes it's like a discarded thing. And I feel we're the most vulnerable in terms of voting rights, like, you know, or even taxation policies. So I'm just curious, in the States, how do we go about, I'm not saying lobbying for us, and Martha and DA is doing a super job about that, us being part of the DNC, but how do we go about, Americans abroad have always had a soft power, Thomas Jefferson, and I'm just thinking historically, what do we do to increase the perception that we count, and it's to the benefit of everything, you know, that's going on in the homeland? I don't know how it's not a question that there's like an easy answer for, but it's just something I know a lot of Americans abroad must feel when they get pushback on social media.
Yeah, and maybe even in person, wherever you may be living, you know, this perception of America right now, I feel like is so at odds with, you know, again, this foundational principle or promise of who we are, and the thing that I feel like we've always tried to live up to. We've never arrived there, right? We've never fully achieved that more perfect union or made good on the promises, you know, first written down in 1776. But I've always been proud of the fact that we've and I mentioned all these cases in history where we fought through to get a little bit closer, right? And now we see this awful regression, this Make America Great Again movement, you know, the most ironically named, you know, movement in the history of the world, if you're asking me. And I think it can confuse people around the world for whom, you know, without irony, America really has been this shining example, not without problems, you know, not without caveats, but this idea that we're all equal, we'll be treated equally under the law, and it doesn't matter. No me importa. I don't care where you came from, how many generations your family's been in this country, or if it's just been a few days. You're as American as anybody else. I mean, find that somewhere else in the world. I'm sure it exists, but maybe not like America. And then you have this nativist, hateful, racist, corrupt, criminal president who is defying every single one of the best traditions of this country. And people can be forgiven for asking, you people voted for this? A majority in the popular vote voted for this man. He won fair and square in the electoral college. I mean, there are some answers that are demanded of us that we must give, but I think especially those on this call are in a position, as I often am in Texas, by the way, when I travel the country, people are like, what the hell is going on? You have the most obscene abortion ban in America. 3 years after 19 kids and 2 teachers were slaughtered at Uvalde, you haven't changed a single gun law in your state to make it less likely. The minimum wage is $7.25. You're the least insured in America. And I have to tell people that's not who we are. We're this incredibly beautiful, independent, freedom-loving people that just happen to have a government that's not very reflective or representative of who we are. And it has a lot to do with voter suppression, voter intimidation. And yes, Democrats need to do a better job of connecting with people, registering them, turning them out, making the case, listening to them, reflecting back what we're learning from them. And so I see your ability to do that abroad with our fellow Americans, but also with our fellow democracy-loving human beings on the planet. One quick thing that I've been thinking about and really pondering is there's this really powerful axis of authoritarianism that all of us have seen grow before our eyes. Trump's warm embrace of Bukele in El Salvador, or Orban in Hungary, or the flirtation with the AfD, or Marie Le Pen, or Farage, or I mean, we can go name after name after name, far right extremist authoritarian movement after authoritarian movement. Where is that on the left? And even if we put aside partisan politics, where is that on the side of people who love democracy? Why don't we have that access or that alliance on our side? I mean, it may exist in some way, but it's not as prominent or powerful in the way that I see, J.D. Vance in his visit to Germany, or Donald Trump and his involvement in UK politics. And I don't mean that we have to employ the same tactics, but you talked about that soft power. And man, you've got it, and I've got it, and we've really got to use it right now. And again, I think a great opportunity for Democrats abroad. And part of the reason I'm so interested in meeting Democrats in Berlin next month is just to hear how you're doing that right now, and how those of us stateside can be helpful to you.
Right. Our next question is from Nancy CG. Nancy, are you there?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Loud
can
and
hear you.
clear.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Beto. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Angela, Martha, thank you. And Athena, thank you for doing this. Beto, I live in France. I'm an American in France. My question to you was, if the Democrats can win back the White House in the next presidential election, in your opinion, what do you think we need to do differently this time so that we never end up in this situation again? What bold moves do we need to make, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, hindsight being 2020, when we had the White House, the House, and the Senate. And look, I know our control of the Senate was a complicated one, right? But we clearly did not use it to maximal effect, which would have included, to give you some specifics to answer your question, abolishing the filibuster and using power on a strict majority basis. Again, it's a tough conversation, and reasonable people can disagree, but we're living through the consequences of failing to use power effectively, failing to pass voting rights, which would have ensured that if you mail in your ballot, that ballot is going to be received, it's going to be counted, that vote is going to be cast, and it's going to count towards what I hope is going to be a majority for Democrats in these incredibly important U.S. Congress elections. Immigration, which is the albatross hung around every Democrat's neck for as long as I can remember. And look, I'll say that our party, present company excluded, deserves that. We have been talking the best immigration game for as long as I can remember. I'm almost sick of hearing it at town halls because I'm embarrassed for our party. Because when we had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House in 2009, we had it again in 2021, all of that talk didn't materialize into action. And so look, voters could be forgiven for saying, look, I like what Democrats are saying. I like about, what they're saying about, raising the caps on visas, ensuring that if you want to come here to work or join family or escape persecution, that there's a orderly legal path for you to do that. But when they have power, they don't seem to do it. So, I'm going to hold my nose and vote for this asshole who says incredibly awful, cruel, demeaning things. But I think he's a man of action, right? I mean, that's Trump's con job. And unfortunately, a lot of our fellow Americans have believed it, but Democrats have really given them, in some ways, the permission to do that. And so I would want the next Democratic president to run the tables on these issues. I did a town hall in Milwaukee recently with Mandela Barnes, who might be running for governor. of Wisconsin. And he said, next time Democrats get power, we've got to drive the car like we stole it. And I loved that metaphor. I mean, again, we're so good at speaking in paragraphs and having the lawyers check what we're going to say and making sure that this doesn't offend anybody, while the Republicans are just like, screw all that. I just care about power and using this power as effectively as possible, even if it's unconstitutional. I want us to adhere to the Constitution, to follow the rule of law, but within those guidelines, everything has to be on the table, and we've got to deliver for people. And in real time, folks have to see the difference in a positive way in their lives. Joe Biden cut childhood poverty in half, added millions of people to the healthcare rolls, passed historic climate legislation. We've never seen that in America before. Worked with Republicans to do infrastructure legislation. Unfortunately, so little of that showed up in people's lives in real time, or in ways that Democrats effectively and maybe shamelessly took credit for. So I want us to have learned all these lessons from the Biden and the Obama administrations, from the Trump administration, and then use those lessons to wield power more effectively than a Democrat has done since probably FDR. That's probably the last Democrat I can think of who operated in the way that I think we need to going forward, right? Damn the consequences and the politics. As long as it's legal within the bounds of the Constitution, use that power to deliver for the American people, or we will never get it again.
Okay, our next question is from Rick. Rick, can you unmute? Rick, are you there? No. All
Yeah,
right.
I'm here. I'm here. Sorry.
Okay.
There are too
Okay.
many steps here to get unmuted. Right.
Okay.
Thank you all, Beto, Angela, Athena, and Martha. Talking to you from London. My question to you, Beto, being there in Texas, I mean, there are so many of us who are just so flabbergasted at what is going on. My question to you, your fellow Texans, are they buying this? When it comes down to now starting the proceedings for the elections, Democrats are going to be out there, face to face with people instead of people listening to somebody on Fox News. They're talking to somebody face to face, small groups, semi-large groups, whatever they might be. And it's going to be like, really, are you really buying this? Do you really understand what's going on? Is this ploy of the gerrymandering, is that actually going to work? I would hope that there's more hope for Texans, and I take that just you being a Texan as the example, because it's pertinent across the country, really.
Rick, thank you for this question. And to bring everybody up to speed, and I think most of you know this, but just to get us on the same page, this gerrymandering that Rick was referring to and that I mentioned at the outset, Trump saying I'm entitled to 5 more seats. It involved the state legislature, the Republican majority of the state legislature, redrawing the congressional maps in the state of Texas, the 38 congressional districts. And they specifically looked at 5 districts currently represented by Democrats and redrew them, meaning changed the boundaries of these districts to bring in more Republican voters and to expel more Democratic voters so it'd be easier for a Republican to win that seat. That's the cynical calculation that they've made. Now they will have 5 Republicans representing these districts. Rick asks an excellent question. We don't have to accept the premise of their calculation. We can still fight to win, even though the terrain is going to be a little bit more challenging in these 5 newly drawn districts, by design, of course. Does not mean that we have to lose them. The president is historically unpopular. His policies, we just mentioned immigration, his signature policy was the border and immigration. He's underwater on that one. It turns out people don't like these agents just rounding up their fellow Americans in their neighborhoods and detaining them illegally, deporting them illegally, and tearing apart families and communities. We need to run on these issues. And here's the other thing. Some of the pre-existing Republican represented districts had to lose Republican voters. They had to feed those Republican voters into these newly created districts, meaning that the Republican representatives' hold on power is a little bit more tenuous right now, right? Like if they were going to easily win re-election under most predictions, now it's going to be a little choppier going into 2026. So in the 5 newly drawn districts, we need to field the best Democratic candidates. And I have no purity tests, no orthodoxy. If you believe in democracy, the Constitution, and you are a Democrat, then we're going to get, and you can win. We are going to get behind you. And in those 5, más o menos districts where Republicans currently are representing and they had to lose Republican voters, let's field 5 high quality Democrats there. And we're in the process right now of helping in the recruitment. The event that I saw Tara at in Pearland, that was a recruitment event. We're trying to find high quality Democrats, people who've never run for office before, but the highly popular high school principal, the retired sheriff, the Marine lieutenant who's given the best years of her life to this country and now is retired. She now wants to run for office. We want to get behind these folks and make sure that they have an even shot or better of winning. And then last thing, Rick brought up a really good point. Look, Democrats, again, present company excluded, have tried to do this by remote control through money at a distance on social media. That stuff just doesn't work. You have to show up in person. You got to go to Pearland. You got to go to Amarillo. You got to go to Lufkin. You got to go to Wichita Falls. And you got to show up and eye to eye, face to face, human to human. You got to connect with people and you got to listen to them. You got to answer their questions and you got to connect the dots. You're pissed off that the VA center that you have to drive to from Wichita Falls to Dallas, the wait time there is 6 months to get an appointment. Well, Donald Trump has cut 83,000 positions at the VA. There's someone to blame. And you need to be able to say, I, as a Democrat, am going to fight for veterans. And I'm going to do that by restaffing the VA, holding them to the highest levels of accountability, and making sure that you can get in when you need to get in, given the fact that you put your life on the line for this country. If we'll do that, and we did a version of that in 2018. I went to every single county, all 254 in the state of Texas, when I was running against Ted Cruz. We produced the largest voter turnout in Texas history. I got within 2 points of Ted Cruz, but more importantly, down ballot, we won 12 state house seats. We won 2 congressional seats. We had no business winning against entrenched, well-funded incumbent Republicans. We picked up 19 judicial positions in Harris County. We flipped Harris County to a Democratic county judge. So good things happen when we show up and meet voters where they are. And Rick, I love the premise of your question. We do not have to accept that their grab for power is inevitable. We can fight back and we can win some, maybe all of these districts.
Okay. I think we're at the end of our time. We're close to the end of our time, aren't we? We've had a lot of great questions today. It's been really, really great to hear everybody, and hopefully we can do something like this again. Yes, we are looking forward to seeing Beto in Germany, where I live, and we'll definitely put that information out for everybody. Martha, do you have some final words?
Well, just a big thanks to everybody who joined us today, and especially for Beto for creating this event in the last week. Really, really terrific to have the opportunity to exchange amongst ourselves who live abroad with you as somebody who's doing really important mobilizing on the ground in the United States, how things are at the moment and what's possible and what we can do. I just wanted to add one thing about all the attacks on voting rights of those of us who live abroad, on mail-in voting, and also the executive order from March 25th. That was struck, with a temporary injunction, but Democrats Abroad is involved in the courts in challenging that executive order. We've shared testimony, and there are efforts now by the Elias Law Group to get a permanent injunction. So we are there doing everything we can to protect the votes, the very precious, almost sacred votes, as John Lewis would say, of all of us who live abroad. Which is so important. So, every little thing that all of us do makes a difference. Including being here today. So, thanks to everybody who joined. And we're going to pop some links in the chat box for things that you can do next. You can volunteer with Democrats Abroad. You can donate to help us. but especially create community wherever you are. Reach out to other Americans. And I'll just hand over to Beto if he has any last remarks.
Martha, I love everything that you just said. You know, you're giving people ways in which they can be active and have a role in this, and remind us that in a democracy, there are no sidelines. You know, as tough as the work is that we're describing, whether it's volunteering for Democrats abroad, donating, you know, creating community, as you just said, it's not something you have to worry about in Iran or Russia or China, where you don't have a democracy and you don't have a government of, by, and for the people. And so if we want to renew this, if we want to be able to deliver it to the generations that follow us, then we've got to come through right now at this moment of truth. But the great news is we can come through. And we know it because we have come through before against much longer odds. So let's take some faith in one another. Let's continue the work, and let's stay in touch. And looking forward to seeing everybody in Berlin on the 7th. And Martha, I cannot thank you enough for how responsive you've been, how active you are, and what a great example for Democrats, whether they're abroad or here at home, about how we take action and how we lead. So I hope this rubs off on the rest of us stateside in the work that we've got to do in 2025 and in 2026. Thank you for bringing us all together.
Thank you so much, Beto. Thank you, Athena. We hope to see you again sometime soon. And I just want to tell everybody before we go, please, everyone, whether you think you have an election or not, request your absentee ballot. And then after you request your absentee ballot, take 5 minutes to send a text or a WhatsApp or a Signal or an email to your friends and family at home and abroad and remind them that they need to vote too. So with that, everybody have a great rest of your day wherever you are.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome. Bye.
Thank you.